I realized recently I have just been obsessed with divorce. I talk to my daughter all the time, like these random kind of thoughts, sort of she jokes around about my red string type of thinking, but it's really true. And, you might think because I'm a divorce attorney and have been for a long time that that's why. And that's what I'm saying. But it really isn't. It's the fact that, divorce became my only tool. It was like, they've said, like, if you've got just a hammer, then every problem becomes a nail. Well, divorce was my hammer. In fact, that was the nickname that I earned as an attorney, the hammer. So every question that came to bear, it became divorce was the answer. Oh, well, let's get you a divorce. Well, how quickly can we get you divorced? And even in my own life, when, I was young, my parents got divorced. Before that, my mother had been divorced when I was a young child. So it was sort of natural. And in fact, it's a generational thing in our family. My mom's parents got divorced. That's completely bizarre for, someone born in the 40s whose parents got divorced in the 50s. That just plain didn't happen. But it was completely normal in my family. And I went into marriage. Actually, I selected a spouse whose parents didn't get divorced. They had been married forever because I didn't want that for my family. But at the end of the day, when we had conflicts, and the conflict, honestly, the conflicts that we had, I wanted to go back to school because I met my spouse when, we were in school. He wanted me to be a stay-at-home mom. He's trying to control my life, keep me from being all that I can be. And, we just hit an impasse and, ultimately he filed for divorce, but divorce became the answer. And that's kind of a head scratcher if you think about it for, a guy who came from a very stable family where divorce was an answer. And, I think that's indicative of the fact that I think as a society, we've just become obsessed with divorce. Like divorce is the answer to every relationship question. In fact, people go into marriages these days hoping they don't get divorced as opposed to, fully prepared and committed to doing whatever it takes not to get there. I've started to just see with my clients like, oh, okay, you came in, you wanted a divorce. I got that done for you. I got that done quickly. But on the other side, you've still got a lot of the same problems that the divorce was meant to solve. Or, really the divorce couldn't solve at all. Like, for example, lots of times women, will initiate divorce more than men. That's actually a real sore spot for a lot of guys. And I had a recent discussion with one of my friends as to why that is. Is it because women have higher standards? Is it because, men are just more tolerant and, adaptable? And I don't really know the full answer to that question. I will tell you that I've heard of this thing called the 90-10 rule or loop that women will get into. And it's where they become sort of obsessed with, what their husband doesn't do right, that they're 90% there, but that 10% isn't quite right. This happens very often with, women who are, say, in their 30s. Their husband doesn't date them anymore. They've got kids. He's gotten all serious. He goes to work. He comes home. He's not engaged. He's playing games, etc. Not really attending to the relationship or, romance side of the equation. Maybe even not even being as engaged with the kids as he needs to be, but he's working all day and a lot of times carrying, the bulk of the breadwinning responsibility. Now, that's not true in every case, but this is something I've noticed, okay? And women can get there too. It's like, they're working alongside of their spouse, maybe even over functioning, taking care of more responsibilities with the kids and, really feeling like they deserve, some attention and pampering and, not just, sex that isn't, very romantic or fulfilling for them. And so they begin to obsess about what they don't have in their marriage. And, what's the cure to that? I mean, most people, if they don't step out, start to think, oh, change my spouse, change my life, right? They start to think, well, this is my way out. This is the solution, to all the problems that I have. And they lose sight of that 90% that their spouse is getting right. Okay. And so this is how it ultimately ends up playing out. They end up getting the divorce that they wanted, so they don't have to put up with the loveless, unromantic spouse that they had. But also now, if they weren't working before, they're definitely working now to make ends meet. They're still dealing with dealing with kids on their own. Also, they're having to deal with this acrimonious relationship that they have with their spouse that, maybe got set in place because they were focused on what he wasn't getting right all the time. And he gets a new girlfriend. In fact, he gets, pretty much right into a new relationship. It's statistically, men are going to find a new partner and, get remarried really much more quickly than women are. And so now he is supporting this new person and, showing up from your point of view for her in a way that he never did for you, except that what you're actually seeing is he's doing the exact same things that he was doing when he was with you in your home, which is going to work, bringing home his money, paying the bills, and, doing the family stuff, like to whatever extent he does. Maybe it's because he's in a new relationship, the honeymoon phase hasn't worn off. She hasn't become obsessed with that 10% that he's not doing, right for her. You, on the other hand, are out there. You're in this wild, wild west of dating situation. And, amid, trying to deal with the co-parenting and kids on your own and job and house and everything and, less financial resources, you're out there trying to date guys who want to, go out, party, have fun, and they don't want any responsibility. You're finding this over and over and over again. And this is a pattern that emerges. We want what we can't have. And so one of the prescriptions that, I have for people who come into my office, and I always ask them, why is it you're getting divorced? Because I want to make sure that the reasons they're getting divorced are looking for that solution are, it's a problem that divorce can solve. Not every attorney does that. I didn't always do that, but I really don't want to, help broker a solution that's not going to give a person what they really want in the long term. So if I have someone come in and say, look, basically, the love is gone. We just don't get out there and, do like we do. He doesn't look at me like he used to. And I think there are, more romantic, better fish in the sea. I challenge them. Like, I'm going to challenge you to sit down and, for 10 minutes and write down every single good thing that there is about your spouse, all of them. And then what on the other side of the paper you can do to make up for the difference. Like, can you start to initiate dates? Can you be romantic? Can you say affirming words? What can you do to set up your marriage to close the gap on that 10%? And I guarantee you, if you do that, you're going to have a much better perspective and, maybe even find out that divorce is not the answer or the solution to the problem that you're facing. We'll see you next time.